Hello and welcome back to another Angular Bootcamp development session. So we're the folks over at Oasis Digital, and these sessions are a time that we just go through, we take a look at our curriculum, and just find ways that we can improve it, and we're just kind of capturing that live on the camera. So this week you got myself, Paul Spears,
Kyle Cordis,
Jack Valbus,
Dr. Gibbon.
and online we've got
David Moore.
All right, so today we're going to take a look at the process of just kind of going through, and we're going to consider adding a new topic. So our curriculum is already very flush, very full, and it was kind of created over time to focus primarily on the pieces that we knew were absolutely most critical to the business needs of the clients that we had, as well as the students coming in, helped further guide how we've shaped this curriculum over the years. And so as a result, it's kind of naturally taken the shape of the most important things are often what is at the forefront of the business needs of our clients. And as a side effect of that, things like the animations, the polish, things that are often considered an afterthought to the life cycle of building an application have kind of gotten left by the wayside for the core heart of our curriculum.
Yeah,
So,
I would say that like early on, especially, people they're just like, we need to learn this, like I need to make it functional.
well, and if we want to
Yeah.
pay someone to learn Angular, do I want to learn state management really well, or would I rather they have spent that time teaching me animations? Like the general mindset we see from students is, I can learn animations on my own
But
after the fact.
I really think over time we've seen more and more desire to do it well from the beginning from customers.
Sure.
So I think now is the time to start moving animation into our curriculum early on, instead of it being an optional thing to learn later.
Sure.
Like I think that now is the time in the industry to do that. In fact, I'll tie in. People love hearing about this one. Has anyone heard of the email client Superhuman?
I've heard of it.
It's like the endless rage of discussion on Twitter. It's part of this this fad, I guess. Some people are calling it a fad. Other people think it's going to be like a huge sweeping theme in our industry over the coming years, and I don't know which one is right. But it's called a luxury software. It's like, what if we paid attention to making just everything really nice? And people say, well, if you look at mature industries, that matters a lot. Like cars. Cars are a mature industry. There's a huge market for luxury cars. They get you there at the same speed in the same direction, but all the little pieces are just done nicely. And so apparently there's now a growing, serious, large-scale demand for just more of, I guess, luxury is maybe not quite the right word in software, but software where you care about getting all these little bits right. So I think that now is a great time for us to be digging into this.
Yeah, I mean, there's tons of research out there that goes on to show about the importance of animation for the UX and actual usability of your core product. And I'm not disputing any of that.
Yeah.
It's just that based on demand, this has not been at the forefront of the needs of.
I would
what
say that's
people
the
arrive
case
with.
for the early demand, but I think that is now shifting.
Sure.
And now is the time.
Yeah.
Because I think typically what we've seen early on especially is just adopt some off-the-shelf things like Angular Material, which we very often encourage and help customers with, which has a bunch of animation already baked into it.
Yeah.
But I think as this broader insistence on polish continues, I think that more and more teams are going to be responsible for doing it themselves,
Right.
not only using off-the-shelf things.
All right. So kind of with that lead in here, the typical kind of path that we would go through here is we would start off by kind of looking for just some simple low-hanging way that we can just bring in just the bare minimum of some animations, maybe not even with a whole nother step, or maybe we make a little bitty step, but it's just a very small little example.
And maybe we figure out between which two would we do the smallest introduction, and we do that, and then we look for places we could do a little more animation as we go.
Yeah, that's typically how we introduce new topics. That said, we've got to continue to consider this trade-off of our already overflowing 3 days, and how are we going to fit yet another topic in?
I really think
We overflow to 4 days, perhaps.
I mean, there's been discussion about about that, and there's even been discussion of kind of more explicitly saying this can be longer. I mean, we already have many customers who buy
Who opt for
a
additional,
long, right.
yeah.
They say we want more, so we already are selling more than our kind of predefined 3 days quite frequently.
Yeah, very frequently.
I don't know if it's more frequently than not yet, but it's quite frequent. And so, I mean,
I had one student in the latest public class that asked why wasn't this a 5-day class? So they were wanting a 5-day class.
yeah, and that's a little tougher for us to do on a public, although that's a possibility.
I mean,
We could
I
literally
feel like
offer
we
a
could
5-day
do that.
experience and say you can buy 3, 4, or 5 of
I
it.
think with
But,
our curriculum, if you
Oh,
like,
you could, yeah.
Oh, easily.
yeah, that you could easily
Yeah.
talk about it for an additional 2 days without.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, we occasionally get those people worried. Is there going to be enough to fill this up? I say, there's enough to fill like several of these up. And so, okay, so Paul, something I've heard you talk about many, many times is that we should try to introduce things in a motivated way, not just at an arbitrary point.
Right.
So is there any particular point in here, and if so, how deep, that it starts to become like motivated, not just like decorative, but like a spot where you really, like, is there a spot in here something really ought to be animated?
Well, let's take a look at it actually running,
Yeah, it's probably the most
and just take a look at some of the features, because it's not actually until we get to template events that we actually have a way of even changing some state, which is what you use to trigger animations.
Okay, so the earliest possible candidate is really quite high, right after template events.
Yeah, so template events would be
I mean,
the
it's not
first one. Here we've
that
got
high.
clock in, clock out, changes some text. Matter of fact, this right here, this hover, imagine
Oh,
an animation
definitely,
on this.
Yeah, that actually would be really nice to
Where, like,
be able to
it
like
grows in
highlight
size
the
and
one that
change
you're.
color.
I mean, couldn't we do that right now though?
Well, maybe like have it change size or anything
Let's
like that. Like,
let's go back to the list. So a hazard here, I know this one has been the subject of a lot of churn over a number of years, is where step 204 is. We used to do 204 considerably sooner. It's about 12 steps in now, and right now it's about 12 in. I think it used to be about 3 or 4 in. But for the sake of motivating, we ended up putting more sort of functional things sooner and pushing this later. The challenge is that fundamentally, animations are kind of built on this, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Because they involve animating class and style properties.
So, I know when I'm teaching the class, this is where I start putting in, like, actually like doing stuff in the workshop applications. So for this step, the workshop I usually do is click on an item in the list and make it highlight, so you can like select an item.
Yeah.
So if you could make some kind of animation, you could make some kind of animation there that would like show, like somehow affect the one. So like I've just been highlighting the text, but if you make something that
Yeah. Well, I was wondering
That's
if maybe
better.
like immediately after this,
yeah,
we
I
could
think that would be
introduce
good.
it. I mean, obviously there's a temptation to try to do it sooner, but it seems like if we did it sooner, we'd end up having to explain the stuff that's in step 204 in order, like, wouldn't we? Like,
Well, let's take a quick refresher of.
yeah, what's in that animation webpage
So here's
you were
another
on?
thing to consider. Is that a lot of times we get like real gung ho about wanting to use Angular to do animations, when a lot of things can simply be CSS animations.
Well, they talk about CSS
Yeah.
transitions. It's
Right.
literally linked on here.
Now, the key thing, though, that binds these two together, in my opinion, is whenever you have CSS transitions, that should be driven by state maintained by Angular. And so that's kind of the thing
Well, sure.
that actually provides that motivating need. So,
what is the
Like a cart flip.
what is the official answer to the boundary of when you should use the CSS transition and when you should use an Angular animation? I know that Angular animation can do many more things, but
well, that was part of my next question, which is like, hey, these docs have gotten really, really great.
let's just look at this doc.
So let's just start by taking a
Yeah.
look at what they say.
Yeah, let's just look at this doc and see if there's something here that might.
So here they expect that you're already familiar.
Yeah, which of course they were
with
familiar
the
with.
tutorial and architectural. They just walk you through enabling the animations.
Right.
Importing functions into components.
Yeah, so you got to get them available, and then you define your animations. Yeah.
Okay, so here they're animating a transition. It changes in HTML from one state to another. Open or closed on a button.
Yeah, so they're saying what animating the transition instead of just setting them. So it's sort of if a straight class or style binding is too abrupt, you could upgrade to this instead.
Angular uses the style function. Okay. So,
Yeah,
struggling to see the Angular tie-in so far.
We'll get to it here. It'll be obvious in the first example, because I've been through this to help people get up and running before.
Mm-hmm.
You actually give a name to your states, which is like, this is going to be frustrating because it's like another kind of state, right?
Right.
Yeah. Okay. So here we go. Here we are giving a name to a couple of states, and then when you get down here in a minute, it'll show you how you actually activate those states.
Sure.
Okay. So the animate function determines, you can say how long it should take. Okay. Of course, it has all the easing stuff, which is great. Oh, you went code. Okay. So you describe how to transition from one state to another, and there's a little more you can do, but this is the most straightforward you can do. Okay, keep going here. They build up to a full example, and it's really pretty helpful. Okay. So look how declarative that is.
So you
Up here,
basically
right here.
Yeah.
you make a state diagram,
Yeah.
right?
Pretty much,
And
yeah.
And where's the chunk that connects what's happening in the animation to what's happening in the code?
That is a piece of template code right here.
There. Yeah. Yep.
Now,
And it's actually got a different bit of template syntax, which is a thing I always found most surprising.
now here's what I don't understand. So, like, I see all this, I understand all of this,
Mm-hmm.
but again, what is the difference between this being an Angular animation and just what could have been a CSS animation, defined as two different CSS selectors or CSS rules?
Yeah, so that's the thing. That is still not super clear to me, is what exactly is that boundary between what you can do with one and what you can do with the other. And should you do everything you can with the CSS transition until you're forced to use an Angular animation? Because it's certainly, and you can make a pretty compelling argument, right? You could say, well, you could use this, and then people on your team, especially one of these big corporate sprawling teams that we work with all the time, right? So we have some team members who already know how to do this stuff with CSS transitions. We'll just let them do it. And certainly Angular does not stop you from doing that. So it's not super clear to me what the boundary is of when you make the switch. Now, that may actually be kind of trivial for us as instructors, because we're not currently offering a CSS transitions class. We're offering an Angular class. In an Angular class, you're going to learn the Angular way to do it. So I think that might be totally justifiable.
Yeah, this example here, to Paul's point, looks like something that could be done purely with setting the proper styles and just having CSS do its thing. It's not complicated enough, I think, unless I'm missing something in terms of maybe timing or the Angular lifecycle as to why you would use this with the binding at style
CSS,
compared to just pure CSS animations and doing ng class or something like that.
CSS transitions can be surprisingly difficult to get all the right behaviors. Now, I am not a CSS transition expert, but it is possible that it is easier to get the correct behavior, even in this example. For example, if a state changes back, and let's say the state changes and it triggers a motion, and the state changes back before the motion finishes.
That is hard to do with CSS.
Right, that's what I'm saying. I think you actually have to be quite the CSS transition guru to get really good overall results. And so it's quite possible that getting good results may be quite a bit easier here.
And
Also-
actually,
Go ahead.
I've used this before, and to your point with that,
Yeah.
like I've done things where like I have like maybe like a very small inbuilt chat thing,
Yeah.
which I had to do for a college project, but like we had like hopping between windows and things like that, making things slide across and slide forward.
Yeah.
And if you do certain situations where we just do this, it's almost like a state diagram.
Yeah.
Where you're doing like actual animations between like a game kind of.
Yeah.
Like, it's kind of like that kind of system.
Yeah.
Where like if you hop back and forth between the states really fast, it automatically does the
Right.
transitions for you. Versus like I'm good at CSS.
It's
fairly,
super hard to
but
do
it's
that right.
hard to do that. And
Yes.
I'd rather just learn like, oh, there's an additional thing I just put in my component, and it's housed there, it's reusable, versus having to like dive really deep into complicated.
Yeah. You can also like reuse these because it's kind of just JavaScript.
Right.
So you could like
Yeah.
define it one place and import it to the point you need.
Oh, that's a good point.
Yeah, so like
I mean, that might be a good example of
Yeah.
showing you've got an open close or a flip state, where you're showing the front or the back, and there's user interaction that happens right in the middle, and how the Angular handles it one way and the CSS handles it another way.
Yeah. In fact, here even more broadly, like justifying why it's better than a transition, like that's the job of someone who made this to do in a conference talk, right? Now, although it is true that many people come to our Angular class who have not really necessarily decided if they're going to use it or not, at the same time, like our job is to teach you how to use this stuff. Like when we bring up components, we don't bring up the web component API and then launch into a diversion to show you why you should be using Angular components instead of custom element web components, right? We're like, well, you're in an Angular class, so we're going to teach you this Angular capability. Is that reasonable?
I was going to say that.
But we are still gonna have the question of when do you use CSS, like pure CSS animations versus Angular animations, and when do you mix the two? That's going to come up.
So, like generally, if you're building an Angular application, then you're going to be building Angular components because that's the best choice to do.
Yeah.
Right? And so in our Angular classes, we don't generally take into account the possibility that somebody is wanting to build like portable components for which web components would be better. But in this case, within the context of an Angular application, it is not actually clear whether it's better to use one or the other and what scenarios that is. So I think as part of our like wanting to teach people to build the best Angular application possible, we actually do still need to answer this question, because unlike web components, right, which you may or may not use in an Angular application, we're definitely going to tell people to use CSS animations with an Angular application, and so then we can't kind of like escape from that by just saying, well, it's an Angular application, so
I think
use Angular animations.
At the point that it comes up, we definitely need a thing in class. My question is, do we need to solve that problem before we can start working on work that introduces this?
Yeah, to start it, absolutely not.
All right. That's all I was saying. Yeah, so keep in mind, this is like less than a third of our instruction team. There are people among us who are like, oh yeah, I can tell you. I bet there's at least a couple of people that could eloquently explain exactly what the boundary is, and we will get that explanation, work that in, make sure we all understand it, get it into our curriculum.
Well,
I think
I've been holding back a little bit. I mean,
Yeah.
I've got a little bit of reasoning why I've been like letting the conversation.
Yeah, go ahead.
But to me, it's all about abstraction.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? And so just as like we're not trying to roll everything in Angular as a homegrown custom web component, like we're living on top of the abstraction that Angular provides in order to be able to just live and play nicely in this realm. Similarly, this is an abstraction on top of this particular aspect of application development. And primarily, what I like to look at this as is if you don't build your transitions within an Angular animation, then what you're going to end up doing is you're going to end up copying and pasting and have slight one-off variations of that inside each and every one of your component CSS files. Or if you built it from the ground up to be reusable, you will then go on to reuse it. So to me, it's about the abstraction that this presents, and not so much of I could have done that, of course, with some CSS by itself. Like, I could have written this whole app in just JavaScript.
Right, exactly, yeah.
And
is there anything in here where we can bring this up as an executable and like?
Let's see. I'm sure if we search for the word stack blitz, we'll find it.
If you go to any of the code snippets, you can, like,
If I
hit
go
the-
where now?
if you scroll up to any of like the code snippets that they have, like, and they have options in the top right. What's that
Yeah,
button?
it's hit or miss.
I think
which-
that's copy.
Yeah, that's a
Oh,
copy.
that
Yeah.
copy? Okay, because they used to
Yeah.
have like direct stack splits. Like,
I was wondering if any of these are executable,
I'm
because
not
I would really like.
seeing it.
yeah, I guess this page just doesn't have any stack splits.
That is really.
The
Right here,
The
live
live
example.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and I don't even care what technology.
Yeah,
it
there it
is.
is, stack splits.
Stackless.
I just want to see it. I
And there are-
want to be able to tinker with it. Is what I'm saying. I'm not.
Right.
Yeah, and I think some of our earlier questions are kind of answered once you get out of the introduction, when you get into transitions and triggers,
Yeah.
where you can use wildcards. That if you're going from any state to a closed state,
Sure.
play this animation,
Yeah.
that sort of thing. And then complex sequences gets complex. So
So let's take a look at the code here. Try to understand what's going on.
All right, so let's see. I guess we'll just start at the top, work our way down. So each one of these buttons appears to be a router link to a different example.
Yep.
And they're they've even baked in there. This is cool. I've taken advantage of this.
Mhm.
Stephen Fluin was so excited about this feature.
Yeah.
He put this on his own personal blog, and he showed it to me after it first landed, how you can actually do the route transitions. It's pretty cool.
Cool.
And so I went
So
and
what
I
is-
immediately put that in the project I was working on too.
Yeah.
what does prepare route do?
Well, that's just a function, that you provided, and it gets past the.
Right. I'm just wondering what the function does.
I just want to know what's in it. Yeah.
Yeah.
It
So
just
that
lets
likes-
you go define your own little bit of data on the router, on the route, right?
That's what it appears. So
Yeah. So it's saying use the animation,
Yeah. It's basically adding a hook.
pass that to Angular animation.
see, I'm trying to find the routing module, probably baked inside here. There it is.
Yeah, data animation.
So there it is. Yeah, they've attached
Yeah.
metadata to their route definitions.
Yep.
That way you can know a little bit more about
Yep.
how the route transition itself actually
Yeah.
behaves.
Yeah. So most of them don't have an animation, but a select few do
Right.
have a custom animation
So this will give
attached
you
to it.
that if it exists. And
And if it doesn't, it uses the
And it supplies that
default
route.
the default animation.
Well, see how it passes it to the route animations animation? So then if you click here and you find the route animations animation,
probably in this slide information.
the quickest way would just be to search.
Yeah, they're on that animations file.
Animations TS.
Actually, I believe route animations. That's the name of a feature, right?
Yeah, I don't
Yeah,
know
there
if
you go.
that's gonna-
Hit that top one. Okay, so there you go.
Yeah, no, it was not a feature. It was
Right.
those are the name of the
Yeah,
trigger-
right. The thing
triggers.
after the add is the name of a trigger.
So this does not have very fine-grained scrolling. It's kind of weird.
Yeah, it's kind of odd. Okay, yeah. So there's that hook is just to provide that name, that token,
Yeah, as to
essentially.
which state you're transitioning
Right,
to.
right.
And so that was what tells us, yeah, we're about to
So if we go from the
deal with the
home,
home page.
to the about page, we should see this animation. Or back.
Either way, yeah.
Right.
So it's a little bit weird because some of this is like kind of JSON data, but then other parts are still like these string microsyntaxes. So like the thing on line 18, they defined a microsyntax that lives inside a single string, which is a little weird. I'm not sure I would have done it that way, but
I prefer to learn that though, at least in my case, versus like
yeah.
the complex.
Okay, so why don't you open up one of those and let's
So
look at it a
let
little
me
bit.
go back. So from what I'm seeing here,
Yeah.
I should assume that only on these three route definitions will I see data.
Well, you see, only on those will you see a route level animation, and all the rest
Right.
only have some stuff they demonstrate inside.
Home, about.
Yeah, I mean, there's literally named. I mean, you can just see how
Yeah.
they're
No,
super.
I'm just
easy.
tracking that, trying to track that.
Yeah,
What we expect to see is holding true.
yeah.
So that's actually where they reuse their animations. So I gotta go back and find.
Yeah, and And keep in mind that we're looking at the top level kind of more complex thing. We can also just like literally study one of these individual animations and see, because we need to look for something that'll, because like this is not a reasonable first thing to show someone, right? This is a complex example.
It's actually not that terrible if you strip out all the other things. Like that indirection that they took by way of going through associating it with route data.
But that's what I mean.
That's actually extra.
That's what I mean. Like we would, like what they do inside one of these examples is probably closer to what we would explain first.
I'm not sure, because a route transition animation, like the actual code for it is really, really small, hits all the highlights, and is one of the most easily motivated examples that you could provide as to why Angular.
It's still a very difficult.
But talking, I mean, route transition animations is the last step in the documentation, at least under animations.
That's what I was getting at. You have to build up to get all the pieces in place to talk about it, right? Let's just look at a simple one. So which of these animations did you like as like a simple one? Well, that's funny. Yeah, this is a good one. This is like a super simple one, right?
Well, it toggles the color of two different things as well as
a couple of colors.
Changes the size.
Yeah. So the open close one is So this should be just a handful of properties. This should be an easy one to understand.
So let's see.
I think it's actually named open close, isn't it? Yeah.
Huh.
So it's the page one. Is the that's kind of funny. .4. Someone named it .4.
There's two of
that's weird.
them. There's a .4. Is that as in Angular 4?
I wonder if it's like an older version.
I kind of wonder what the difference is between open close page component TS and open close component TS.
Well, let's just start back at the
I think we better start at the route definition and find out which one's really used, right?
So open close goes to open close page.
Will it let you control click? Let's have that.
No.
Or do you have to? Ooh, gross.
Are they all called open close page component?
No, only one has the word page in it. So this appears to be the one.
And how do we know that it's not pointing to the file open close component? Like how do we?
Yeah, in the introduction area of the documentation, it's supposed to be open close component, not open close page component. So.
But this is where it is, regardless of whatever
Yeah. Yep. Okay. Oh, and look, it's actually this is just an outer thing that brings in the app open close with locking off. All right.
Yeah.
What's on home?
So that must be the other one with the similarly named one, right?
Yeah. What's on the home route?
Okay, so
unfortunately both of no.
So there you go. That's the one. Okay, so this is like kind of the main one for that thing down there. That's what I was getting at. This one that should be pretty simple. Okay, so as the open close trigger, you put that on the thing where any change will trigger reevaluation of the routes. Then you describe your various states, which talk about values, and then you describe your various transitions, which talk about how the values are going to be transitioned between one and the other. And this is about the simplest case. We'll have to get familiar with all the little wrinkles you can do, like the line 36 is a bit of a different wrinkle. And I don't remember the meaning of when you do that. I know it's a 1 second animation. The really interesting one is line 39. This must mean that they must not have covered all the cases, right? If they went to the effort of finding a star to star.
Well, this is kind of like a case statement. So this is if it doesn't fit anything else, it'll do this the last one.
Right. That's why I was wondering if there were any cases that it didn't cover.
So I guess the order matters here.
Yeah. It takes the first matching one, I believe.
Okay, so as we would expect, there is a div here.
Yep.
Where we're, in fact, putting open close on it.
Oh.
And then, check this out.
Yeah, I didn't know we could do
I
that.
did not know about this piece. So in addition to that, it appears as though there are some hooks that it exposes
Yep.
that indicate.
Yeah.
Which again.
So these are these are events that get thrown
Yeah.
that you, and this is something that you can't do with CSS animations by itself, as far as I understand. But yeah, it will fire the start or the done. There's a bunch of other ones that it will also fire.
I'm curious as to what they're doing with that.
They're probably just logging it. Yeah, they're just spitting it out to the log, which is fine for understanding. It's actually a pretty great idea.
Cool.
So see if this has the, like, as we understand, one benefit you get here is you get default good handling of like reversing a change which is not really completed. So my question is, if you click that button on and off while it's still in motion, is there a way to resize so that so that your page remains stable? Yeah, maybe bring that up in a new window. That's funny. So it's hard to do it because it's yeah. So it's like with literally zero effort, we're getting the desired behavior. And it's been a while since I monkeyed with the CSS transition, but I believe it is not nearly as trivial to get the desired behavior. I don't really know though. Could be wrong. Okay, so for that amount of functionality, which is a pretty small amount, how much has to be shown and explained here?
Well, let's see. We could, if we were just to like take this one and pare it down.
Right. Yeah.
We can start there.
Yeah. So one little tiny bit of template for the trigger, and then it looks just like a binding. So if we've already explained bindings, we just have to explain this special binding.
Yeah,
right?
That's associating it with the trigger. Yeah.
So the name is a trigger, and then the value you push in is the state. So you've got to basically provide a line of template that translates between your application state and your animation state.
We could even, I think, pare this down even further, because all of the.
Well, that's what we're looking at. Like, what would be the most pared down?
I think we can actually make like all of that go away.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is that? Yeah, it's not clear to me what the point of all the others were in this example. Try undoing what you removed. Let's see if we can understand what its purpose might have even been, because it seems unnecessary.
Probably just
You're in
as
some
like,
other undefined state.
Yeah, if there are other states.
yeah, it's probably there to define like here's how you would do it, like to show off this syntax. Right?
Oh, whereas we might intentionally only show just the
bare minimum
subset of the syntax.
Especially for V1 of like showing them anything.
Yeah.
Right. It'd be like, state 1, state 2 transition done.
Well, maybe like by the 5th time we use it, we might hit all the variations of the syntax, but we don't. So we don't feel the urge, like examples this do, to try to like introduce something to somebody in a way that shows them every single variation, because that's not good teaching.
Right.
So okay? Well, I guess so. I just wanted to look at it. You're welcome to delete it. Don't keep it on my account.
I actually want to.
Yeah, actually, the documentation does start with just the status open, state open, state closed, and then the open to closed and closed to open transitions. This example is basically they assume you've gone through every single bit of the documentation.
Yeah, right. Which we would
not doing step by step.
Okay.
Right.
Now.
You lost an input.
Did I?
Yeah.
Well, the login input.
Yeah, you probably need that.
Yeah, that was a bit of a format. I wish Prettier was integrated into Staplets, or just auto Prettier stuff in Blitz. Wouldn't that be cool?
I can auto format. I'm not sure what to try and get more on the screen here.
Boy, I hope this works.
Let's see. We've got the selector for the component, the animation. The animation has the one trigger,
2 states, which is the
2
minimum.
states, and then the transition back and forth. Or for hours, like it might even be worth just having hours.
Yeah, just
Do
let
the
it be the
2A.
same as the first one, so there's less to.
Lots
Yeah,
of
I
moving
agree.
parts.
Yeah, man. If we're trying to Like, what's the least that could be?
Oh, that's interesting. Because when you clicked it in the middle, it looked like it finished, and then I don't know if you're just missing or
If you just bring
I'm
up-
missing.
You've taken out
Yeah.
closed to open, so it's not doing that one.
No, it's
No,
It is.
It's still there.
I put the 2A.
bidirectional. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
You can just leave this window open though, and it does.
Yeah. So the difference is originally is one was open to closed is 1 second,
Yeah.
closed is only half a
Yeah,
second.
but we
Yeah.
don't need that for a very first. So,
Right.
Well, how about the complexity of the states? Just so that all this stuff fits on a screen.
Like we just make the
What-
height. Like we don't need to
Yeah,
Opacity.
that's what I was going to ask. How would you feel about only animating
height and
one
color.
Two is two.
I like the
Like two-
color because it shows that, like right away, right out of the gate, it actually shows the power of it. Understands the gradient of
Okay.
of a color
Yeah.
as it
Okay.
animates through it, and we didn't have to specify something different for numeric versus.
Yeah. So
Right.
Yeah, it knows how to tween between the two.
This is
Exactly.
feeling pretty good. This is feeling a lot, like relatively minimal. I mean, how many? That's enough lines. It'll easily fit, even when we have to zoom our fonts for a long narrow room
For
situation.
the record, anyone watching, we're not going to go put this in our curriculum. This is just a thought exercise of
Yeah.
what it might look like.
Yeah,
Copy
we
paste.
we will choose more tasteful colors.
Well, it'll be in the context of like
We'll put it in the context we have, right?
of something like.
We'll make it
like one of
motivated,
these.
right?
Well, that could be kind of cool if you animate this.
The bars.
Yeah, you could definitely animate the bars going from 0 to whatever their value is
Which
Yeah,
is just
yeah.
on load.
remember, like we would not do it on this one because literally this is the first time
Right.
they have seen a class or style binding.
Yeah, but you could do
Right.
it like you would basically
After.
copy this
Yeah.
step and then animate it.
Well, actually,
from
let me
void
think.
to
Let's
true.
think about that a little bit because as I look at the the syntax for this, like this really isn't any class or syntax binding either. Like this is just a normal data binding with
Correct.
this extra character,
Yeah,
and the
that's true.
syntax inside doesn't look anything like a class or style
So-
binding either.
Here's a question, actually,
It does though, yeah.
going to this example we were just looking at. So for those bars, we don't actually know ahead of time what width we want them to
Right.
be.
True.
And how do we handle that with these states, right? Because it doesn't look like there's any way, like you have to know ahead of time what everything's going to look like.
I have not yet done a data-driven Angular animation.
That would be that's my question is
Right.
how do you do that?
I
'Cause
don't
that
know,
seems
but
cool.
that seems like something we would definitely do like pretty far in. Like that would be
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Now you can, like in height, you can put curly braces in there and put in a variable
Right.
that's in their reusable animations section.
Well, there you go.
And so you wouldn't even need to hard code those into a CSS file.
Right.
So you see lines 24 to 27.
Mhm.
As I understand, like that is basically an echo of what an ng style looks like. Like an object that has like the JavaScript-defined names of CSS properties.
Mhm.
So there's definitely a commonality. I mean, this would be pretty extreme, Paul, but we sometimes are okay with that. Is it okay to show someone like this, like more sophisticated way to deal with styles before we show them ng class and class bindings and style bindings? I mean, conceptually, it feels like this is downstream of a style binding, but I mean, if it's more of like a parallel path, like a different tool for managing styles, maybe it's not like downstream.
I mean, animation is kind of its own thing compared to CSS. You need to know CSS in order to do CSS animations, but you don't need CSS animations to do CSS.
So, by the way, just
In
a reminder,
this case,
there might
yeah.
be a thing called CSS animation, but the thing that we're almost always talking about here is a CSS transition. Key thing to remember.
Correct. Right.
So, I'm not saying this is a good idea, but could you kind of muddle your way through Angular and like every place where you would have used a class binding or style binding decide to use an animation instead, even for things that didn't actually change?
Yeah, you absolutely.
Is there anything to stop you from doing that? Was that mad? Is it a madman thing to do, or?
I think it's the hard way to do something, but yeah, I mean, you could theoretically do it.
I mean, like, would it be possible to just could there be an app out there that literally never uses a style binding because every time it would have used the style, it's actually animating instead?
I mean, yeah, if it was always animating instead of, although I guess the reason you would use a style binding, right, is because it's going to be changing, in which case you would want to animate it, generally.
That's what I mean.
I think you're right, that a sufficiently advanced application would actually never use the style binding. It would always use...
Well, there you go, Paul. We're going to delete the style binding stuff.
There you go.
I mean,
should I put class and style bindings with a legacy?
Legacy.
Yeah. I don't know that I go quite that far.
So yesterday.
That's what I was wondering. Like, is this something parallel to class and style, or is this something you'd have to learn after, or make sense to learn after class and style? Like, I mean, was it just too crazy? Like,
I mean, is there any case...
Thinking about a student in a class, I would say it should be after class and style, because that's the one they're going to use more often. And
but are
if
they
you're
using
running
it
low
more
on
often?
time, you're not going to be using. You're not going to use animation every day.
Are they using it more often because that's what they were
Was taught?
or are they using it more often because that's the way to make a better app?
I'll tell you right now, this sounds exactly like the echoes of the conversation we had with the Angular team about the order in which we taught routing with and without lazy loading.
Yeah.
And how right now there's this observation that you get a lot of folks who use a non-lazy loading in their Angular application, and it's giving an artificially low representation of the load speeds of Angular, simply because developers aren't actually reaching for the right tool to craft the routing out of it.
There are still people today, and I'm not naming any names, but there are still people today in the Angular space, working in Angular for a long time. There are people who should know better, who are on Twitter as well-known people, who still think of reaching for lazy loading as ooh, my application has become sophisticated and advanced. I will reach deep into the toolbox for a lazy loaded route. And we're sitting here going, we've been listening to the Angular team and then teaching that as the primary way of doing it. What year did we start? At least 3 ago?
Yeah, as soon as it came out, effectively.
Yeah. We talked to the Angular team. It was clear from them you're supposed to use it. We started using it from the beginning.
Yeah.
Is this kind of like that?
I think it might actually be. I think the more I think about it, the more I think that it might be.
Because I'm thinking about successful iOS apps. Do successful iOS apps have hardly anything that's not animated?
I mean, like I said earlier, anything on the screen that's changing, you want to animate it, right?
I mean, I'm not a gamer, but there are people in this room that are, and there are people in my family that are. Is there supposed to be anything on a screen not moving?
I mean,
if it's changing state.
Yeah, if it's changing state, it should be moving.
Aren't there things? I mean, my impression is that even things many things. When they're in state, hear me out here. Hear me out. When they're in state A, they're maybe having some kind of movement going on. And when they're in state B, they have some kind of movement going on. And there's some further animation between this movement in state A and this movement in state B, and back. So that this is probably too far, but
we need idle animations in our email apps.
Let me kind of play a little devil's advocate.
Yes.
In terms of someone working on an enterprise project, or something at a company. What if most of the design depends on where you are, but a lot of times the designs are handed down and they don't have animations as part of it.
how do you then insert animations and go through the approval process
or do we even care about
mean-
that side of the business side of things?
So there are people who work in that kind of role, but I mean, we also have people in our customer set, certainly among, our best customers coming to us are probably going to include some people who are working on implementations of, like working on the design system for a company, and that will eventually include idle animations.
Mm-hmm.
I think some solid.
Yeah, is it a question of people aren't putting animations in because they don't know how to put animations in, or that animations are available, or is it that they don't want to put animations in because of the time?
In my experience, it's generally that they don't think about it.
Yeah.
They just think, it's going to be in this state, and then I want it to be in that state, and they don't really think about what happens in between.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
it just like transitions, like
It just
it
right.
just instantly snaps. Then they're like, okay, cool, it works. I don't care.
Well,
But
I've
if
also,
it has like an animation that
Yeah.
like does something nice in between those two things, then they don't complain. They're not like, that's not how I designed it. They're like, ooh, that's really
Ooh.
nice and
Well,
polished.
yeah.
and
That's what I'm
smooth."
saying. But
And
Yeah.
it also, one of the things that we could actually use to sell or justify having animations in the curriculum as well is there's actual performance and then there's perceived performance. And a lot of times animation can increase the perceived performance of an application.
Mhm.
It might take exactly the same amount of time with or without an animation, but the fact that an animation is there makes the user perceive that the application is moving faster than it actually is.
But like we don't have to like justify it. Like our customers are coming to us to raise their game. Like we don't have to justify helping them raise their game. That's why they called us.
Right.
Yeah.
but
I
I
mean,
mean,
Yeah, I've been in public classes for a lot, so I get a lot of the why would I use this sort of questions.
Sure.
So that may also play into
I
the
guess
way
what I'm
I'm
arguing
talking.
for is I think you're actually way ahead of me. I think you're way ahead of me. I'm arguing for we should be introducing animations quite closely to where we're introducing static style bindings.
Yeah, I
Like
think
soon thereafter.
I think I would do it
I would agree with that.
essentially immediately after, because the story that I would tell is like, okay, because the way I kind of transition from talking about general bindings to class and style bindings is, hey, if you want to dynamically set these things, there's some extra special like syntactic sugar that you can use in order to make that easier. And then the transition that I would make to this step would be, but if you really think about it, if there is something on the screen that is changing in this way, then really you should animate it, right? To
Right.
get a more polished user experience.
Just step
so
right
here's how
into
to do
it.
that. And I would use the class and style bindings step not as a here is something that you should do, but as a like stepping stone to get to animations.
Yeah.
Is it at least that's right now? That's how I would do it.
Yeah.
all right, well, let's go ahead and break the video here. And when we come back, we'll actually take a look at it from the perspective of the code now
Cool.
and see what we can come up with. All right, so thanks everyone for watching.
Thanks for watching.
Like and subscribe.
Thank you all.
Ring the bell.